Hey, and welcome to Photographers Lounge Chats, PLC, a podcast hosted by photographers for photographers. We'll be talking about all kinds of things, of course, photography and videography related, covering different topics and answering the most common questions that come up on our Discord server, where people are actually currently watching us live. So if you want to join the conversation, find the links provided in the show notes, and we'll see you someday, hopefully. My name is Jimmy, and today I'm joined by Eva and Janet. Say hi.
Hi guys, Eva here.
Hey guys.
How you guys doing?
Good after some sort of like complications, computers, problems, but very happy to be here and finally live with all of you.
Yeah, we almost didn't make it today.
Oh yeah. Glad that we made it.
Just for anyone that is listening, we have prepared also a no mic chat of sorts. It's called podcast audience. So if you have something you want to say, since you cannot talk directly to us, you can write things there, and I will be monitoring it and bringing up things that might come up through this podcast. But also after the podcast, we are all gonna join in this new feature of Discord called Stages, and I believe there is one that's been prepared there for us, and we are gonna do a post Q&A there, so everyone can talk to everyone and have a little bit of mingling.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, this is if you're listening to this on Spotify or any of the podcast apps, definitely one to watch. Come hang out with us on the server, and because it's a photography thing, so it's nicer to look and see examples. And maybe one day we'll do critiques and share all of your work and talk about them and see how we can all improve together. But let's get into today's topic. So, Janet, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about like manual settings, especially depth of fields and shutter speed, ISO.
Yeah. So exposure triangle stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So where do we want to start? We have some things prepared, and we also have a camera with the scene set up for later with some examples like live. But I think it would be nice to take a look on some examples, some what do you call them? Graphs.
I think, like main concepts. I think we should start from where everything starts, which is like, what do we need to take a photograph, right?
Yeah, so like you hear a lot of talk about an exposure triangle. And what the hell is that? It's basically this thing on the screen, and it refers to the three main things that a camera can control, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're aperture, shutter speed, and ISO.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we, what's the point of visualizing it in this way? How is this beneficial? Can somebody care to explain, or should I keep talking? I can keep going.
No, Janet, can you fill us in?
I mean, yeah, when we change aperture, we change the brightness of the picture, which we also do when we change the shutter speed or the ISO. So everything, what's it called, changes when you change the shutter speed. You also have to change aperture or ISO to keep the same brightness of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So they're connected, and you get different features with each of those settings. For example, blurriness in the background or a motion blur in the picture. So
or noise,
you have to choose wisely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we could summarize it in a way that, when you want to take a photograph, what you actually are is capturing the light that is available.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to capture the light that is available at the appropriate amount, which is a specific amount of light that you want to get into your camera, you have three settings that will modify how little or how much light goes into your camera. One is how big is the hole through which
the
the
lens.
light goes in,
Yeah.
which is basically the aperture.
Mhm.
The other one is how long is it open, so the shutter speed,
The duration.
the duration.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is how sensitive your
Sensitive,
sensor
sir.
is. How sensitive your sensor is. So
Yeah.
the more sensitive, the faster it's gonna capture the light. The less sensitive, the longer it's gonna take to capture the
Yeah,
light.
because I hear about people saying fast aperture. Well, how can a hole, as you describe it, be fast?
And it's because it needs less time to get the same amount of
All
lighting.
right, so it's all referring to the speed of the shutter.
But the sensitivity, yeah.
Yeah, so when we talk about a fast ISO, like in the days of film, for example, we say
Mhm.
fast film,
Mm-hmm.
meaning fast ISO or high ISO.
Mm-hmm.
So fast and slow, and when you're talking about ISO or aperture,
Mm-hmm.
it's all referring to the relation to the shutter speed, meaning it will allow you to use a fast shutter speed
Mm-hmm.
or a slow shutter speed. So I think that's a good way of understanding it. If you hear
Mhm.
people saying, oh, this lens is so nice, it's a fast lens. It's like, what do you mean fast lens?
Does
I
it
always-
run?
Yeah, I
Yes.
thought it was something like that. Like, I don't know what it does because it didn't make sense in the beginning,
Yeah,
The shutter is in the camera. Why
It's-
is the lens
it's
fast?
everything related to how slow or how fast your shutter will have to be to get a proper exposure.
Right. So both of you mentioned this thing kind of like you danced around it a little bit, I would say. I want to point out here that if we look at the triangle, we can see that every aspect, like every line of this triangle,
Mm-hmm.
is referring to one of these features. So we
Mhm.
have the shutter, aperture, and ISO.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of both of these lines, we have two descriptions. So more motion blur, less motion blur on the shutter speed, meaning that every one of these controls have two different effects, right? Or like one effect that they can raise or decrease the intensity.
Yeah, I would say like each one of these settings will give a specific characteristic to the picture. So if it's the aperture, it will be the depth of field.
Mhm.
If it's the shutter speed, it will be the motion capture. So either you get more motion or less motion in your picture.
Yeah.
And then the sensitivity, which is the ISO, will modify the graininess of your picture, so to
Right.
speak.
So I think the shutter is the easiest. The shutter and the ISO is the easiest to understand in a way. Like the ISO is less noise,
Mm-hmm.
more noise.
Yes.
That's it.
From less ISO to
Yeah.
more ISO.
Yeah, of course, they're all affecting how much light there is.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, beside the balance we're going to talk about later,
Mm-hmm.
ISO is simple. No noise, yes noise.
more
But-
noise, less noise. It depends
Yeah.
on the camera you have, obviously.
Of course. But when we go to the shutter, it gets more complicated
Mm-hmm.
slightly because we have motion blur or we have freeze motion. Like even going a very high shutter speed will give you an effect that traditionally back in the day was not even achievable
Mm-hmm.
because now you can freeze very high speed things,
Mm-hmm.
like a bullet or something like that. I don't know, like raindrops, you can freeze them in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires a faster shutter speed,
Yes.
right? But then if
Yeah.
someone is running, you can't shoot them at 1/8 of a second.
No.
They'll leave a ghost behind.
Exactly. Which it can be a nice effect if that's what you're going for. So getting to know these three settings or these three characteristics of the exposure triangle will not only allow you to get the right exposure on your picture, which is important, although you can always modify that to be a little more high key, which is more on the overexposed side, low key more on the underexposed side. But knowing these three things and how they work will actually allow you to work with your photos creatively, implement what they can do in these settings and these scales from more to less, and then integrate that into the way you think about the photo you're going to take and compose your shot.
I feel like you really want to jump ahead to exposure
No.
control.
No, but it's good that the people start thinking about it. Okay, why do I need to know about this
Yeah.
apart from just getting a right exposure image, like
All right. Let me now talk about the aperture, or at least like start to talk about it. The aperture is a more tricky one, and I think because it relates to another thing. So here we see that it controls depth of field.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that, I think everybody who's coming in, they ask
bokeh.
for advice. Yeah, how do I
Yeah.
get a blurry background? And everybody on the server tells them, get a
Fast lens?
a fast lens, basically a prime. and you're good to go. Now, I'm going to jump to a different slide because I think there's something that is often missed. And let's talk about depth of field. Janet, what do you think? Do you want to use this slide or this one maybe? It's easier to
I think this one is easier for the
Mhm.
all right.
start. So everything depends on the aperture when we were talking about the depth of field and the focus distance. So in general speaking, you can say the faster the lens is, or the larger the hole in the lens, the higher the aperture, the more narrow is the depth of field. So this is what you see in the first picture, the one on top, where basically only the head of this animal is in focus and everything else is blurry. And the second picture, in the bottom one, you see a larger depth of field, which is basically made with a higher f-stop or a smaller aperture. So the hole is smaller, which is a slower lens.
Yeah.
So you see that there's more background also in focus, which can be used creatively with a blurred background, mostly for portraits, but especially in landscape photography, you want everything in focus. So you should decide which one you prefer.
Right. So I was wondering if this one shows what I wanted to talk about. No. What I wanted to talk about is also the relation between depth of field
Mhm.
and focal length.
That's like I think another lesson for another day. It's something to have it. Yeah, it will affect. It's just one more thing to have in the equation.
Yeah.
The depth of field will be different at a given f number.
All right,
with
wait, hold
different-
on. I'll prepare a slide for
All
later
right.
and we can talk about it. Let's see some examples here. This is done by Cedric, right? If I remember correctly.
No, this is on
Oh,
the
yeah.
internet.
I missed that one. So this is an example of the shutter speed and how it affects the photo. So the first one, as I was giving an example about the raindrops, you see like every drop is frozen in the air, and then it goes down, and it's more like a line instead
Mhm.
of a drop, basically a dot. And here as well, another example. This is what Eva was mentioning earlier about the relation between these things and the exposure. Of course, here is going to be bright because it's slower, and here is going to be dark because it's faster. However, you adjust your other settings too much. All right, let me go back here. So, let's summarize what have we talked about so far. Can somebody do it? Well,
Sorry.
grab it.
Yes. What did you say? Sorry, I was reading the chat.
Anything interesting in the chat?
So Gum Gum is asking if the depth of field is actually starting from the focus point or not. This is a good question. So the depth of field is always an area. So and the focus point is in the middle of that. So let's say that your depth of field is 2 meters when you are focusing at 4 meters, right? If your depth of field is 2 meters when you're focusing at 4 meters, everything between 3 meters and 5 meters is going to be on focus. So your focus point is in the middle of your depth of field range.
Yeah, it's always in the middle. So that's why you see on some lenses you have a focus
Depth of field guide.
or zone focusing guide, basically.
Yeah.
And if you know how to use these numbers, you don't necessarily have to look to see if you're focused or not. So you can just say that, oh, that thing looks about 4 meters away from me, and you set your shutter speed, your aperture, to something that will fit anything between 3 meter and 6 meters, maybe.
Yeah, it's
And then put it in the middle, boom, and take a photo, and it will be in focus. Because everything between 3 meters and 6 meters, and of course, it depends on the lens. Different lenses are gonna have different depth at different apertures. Am I right? Right. She's the zone focusing champ over there.
I anyone that is here that they just use autofocus cameras, they probably have never thought about just try to guess where to focus, but I really love analog cameras, old cameras, and I have some cameras that they don't have autofocus, and they don't even have, they are not reflex, so I cannot really see where the focus is. I have to estimate where the focus is gonna be, and the way I do that is that I just estimate where I want the focus to be, and then I check what aperture I want to use, and then I see, oh, at this aperture I do have a focus that is including the area that I wanted to be in focus, and I'm not that bad at it. Am I? Maybe sometimes I miss focus, but
You're definitely better than I am. Hold on, I think I found something that kind of shows a better depiction. So this one right here is a fish flying in the air. No, it's actually swimming, and we can see that what we were just describing. So a large aperture, which is also confusing because aperture, if you can see here, it's f divided by 2. F stands for focal length. So meaning when you look at the lens, it says 35 millimeter. That is your focal length. And if you already know all of these things, I'm sorry, but we have to talk about them. So that's your focal length. 35 millimeter is your focal length. And if we divide f35, meaning by 2, we will get a certain number. And that number is the diameter of the opening of the lens. So again, like the vision, I'm really bad at math. So if you are too, I'm going to explain it like I would like it to be explained to me. So if we have a cake and only 2 people are going to eat it, more people are like, the pieces are going to be a lot bigger, right? So it's bigger portion. But if there's 8 people that are going to eat it, they're going to get less. So meaning the diameter is also going to be less. So even though the number is growing, it's the number at the bottom of a division.
Yes,
so
it's
that's
the denominator.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you know this, you're never going to be confused again why somebody says bigger aperture, but it's a smaller number.
Yeah.
And here we can also see what we were talking about earlier, that the focus point is always in the middle of that field. So this is the field of focus, highlighted in gray. And we see from f2, it grows down to f8, it grows almost doubles in size. And f22, almost everything is in focus. Although I think I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. Were they asking about because
it's because on the previous photo, in the previous image or illustration, it didn't look like the focus was in the middle. So they were asking like, depth of field is not in the middle of the focus point, like kind of like that. So
yeah. All right. Sorry. Yeah. So here we go. I'm gonna look for another thingy. Sorry, we're not as prepared as we will be next episode. But because we really wanted to put this episode out today.
I can make some small talk with Janet while you get ready.
Yeah.
What of these 3 characteristics or these 3 things in the exposure triangle do you like to use the most when you are shooting in your photography day to day?
I think I set up my aperture the first thing usually, just because it gives me the most creative like room for doing different things. Like the only few things I usually set my shutter speed first is when I do sports or other wildlife, or when I want to blur out water, like the example we had with the fountain. So I want to get this blurry water.
Yeah, you'll be shooting birds recently, right? I guess you have to use a quite fast shutter speed to shoot birds, right?
Yes. So usually for birds, it's like 1/2000th of a second to get them sharp and not blurred. Which also includes that I usually shoot my birds wide open, just because I need all the light I can get.
Ooh, but that must be a bit hard because they move. And to keep like the bigger the aperture, the smaller the depth of field, so you kind of risk like getting things out of focus. I imagine it's not so easy.
Yeah.
You forget.
As soon as they fly off and come towards me or fly away, they get blurred. So just like taking loads of pictures to get finally one.
Yeah, I heard that your camera has a mode that can take a lot of pictures. So I guess that's how you do it.
Yes.
I think Eva
lot of
forgets
data.
that autofocus exists.
Yeah.
You know, like
I never use autofocus. Even with the camera that I might use later here, which is my digital camera, the one I work with people, I do everything manual. Like I'm a little bit like...
She likes to make it hard for herself.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I would not want to do manual with
Big-
birds.
Yeah, of course, because as you were showing us the other day when you went on your last walk taking photos of the birds, you were using very, very long lenses.
Yes, around 300 millimeters lenses.
I think there was one that is like ridiculously long. It was because you were using it on a
600 plus something?
Yeah, it's a 600 full frame equivalent.
600 full. That was the longest one you shot with?
No, the other day I was on a walk and I borrowed a lens.
Yeah.
It's not mine, not
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
And it was a 800 millimeter lens on a crop 2
So
sensor.
1,600.
So it's 1,600 millimeter
The moon.
full frame equivalent.
I think.
So imagine dividing this by 2. How big the diameter must be for a f2 lens.
I think
crazy.
Janet can take the photos of the clouds behind the moon with that one.
Well, you need to get the clouds behind the moon, which is impossible. This is an inside joke. I think, Janet, I showed you that picture,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, I think I mean, of course, I do like working with the depth of field as well. I do take portraits of people quite often, but I also use the shutter speed, for example, when I'm shooting street photography, because I have very little time to take a nice picture. So I would put my shutter speed at a high shutter speed, and then I would be able to just like almost not stop to take the photos of the people in the street. It's a bit creepy, I know, but I really like street photography.
Janet is frozen. We're having, I don't know
Yes.
what happened.
But Janet
I
looks very, very nice
changed
in
my
this
battery.
frozen.
Oh,
Should
She-
work again already.
All right.
all right. Do you want to switch to the Canon and do do some testing?
A live demo.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if this works, guys. Look at this one.
All right. Turn it on. Make sure it's
All right.
connected. I mean, look, run us through everything. So, like, do all the examples. You know,
I'll
like
see
motion
if it
blur, no
works.
motion blur.
Oh, yeah, motion blur.
You know.
There's nothing moving here.
No, but you're
yeah,
moving.
like I move. All right. We'll see.
All right. So we're
Um,
gonna switch to this thing. Just give me a second.
Where what do we have here?
So
All
now
right
we're
then.
looking at
So
the
now we
live
have
feed.
yes.
And you can see the settings on the screen as well.
Yeah, that's actually good. So I'm an ISO 1000. It looks a little bit overexposed. Let's put the ISO. Wait, this one. Let's put the ISO a bit down. Maybe like this.
Hmm.
That looks nice. And yeah, so I can do. Yeah, this is not manual focusing. This is manual focusing.
So now you're shooting at f 2.5, right?
Yeah,
Use the autofocus because you have delay.
I am
Yeah.
trying.
She's actually watching the screen of her camera on the Discord.
Because when I connect it
stream.
through the HDMI, it doesn't show me my screen.
Yeah.
So okay, this is all very ad hoc, people.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Take a
Okay,
photo.
I'm gonna take a photo.
So that was 60th of a second. Nice, you got steady hands, not bad,
Mhm.
right? So here we see that she was able to freeze motion. The motion in this case would be the shakiness of her hands, right?
Yeah.
But let's say you want to shoot and you want to get that nice light on the right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to get that in focus. What would you do?
Then I mean, if I wanna get in focus as well as the flowers, you mean?
Yeah, I want the
Then
flowers and the light.
I will go very high into my aperture.
Right,
I will
and
try
we
like-
see as she's raising the
Aperture, my
aperture.
exposure goes
To black.
down to black because there is not enough time for the light to go in at the sensitivity that I have set, which is ISO 500.
all right. So what would you do?
I would do now is because I know my camera is really low light capable. That means it's not gonna give me a lot of noise when I go high up on my ISO. I would change my ISO and see how it starts looking. The live view is a very nice little thingy. Okay, so now that this is actually quite high. Let's see. This is my max. This is how it would be. And you guys now don't see. You basically see the same type of blur because, you know, once you are previewing, it's always at your biggest aperture.
Yes.
I could show the preview of the depth of field by clicking the depth of field button, which is this one here. And now you can see how it actually changed, how
So now what's
without changing
happening?
the focusing point, I'm showing you the real depth of field I will have.
So basically, inside the lens, the blades are closing to f22, and that's how you're seeing it. It's nice.
So here you can see the difference. This one is the one at f22, and this one is the one at f2.8 or something. It was, I think. So
It was
the
2.5.
2.5, and then this one, as you can see, yeah, it's a little bit brighter. This one could use of like a little bit of a slower shutter speed, perhaps. But the interesting thing, and what we want you to see, is that the focus in the flower hasn't really changed that much, but the focus of the background has changed a lot.
Exactly. Let's try something else. How about that? Do you want to try to do some like an impression of the scene? You know, the stuff that I usually like to do. How would you do that?
All right. So I would let's put this a bit more down because I don't like the noise. Maybe there. I would f22.
Maybe f16.
F16, yeah, perhaps.
Right.
And then I would put my shutter speed at let's say, okay, this I'm gonna have to.
Yeah.
Let's put like this is a fourth of a second, so
Nice.
I would now go.
So now it's
F20,
very bright.
F22
Or
is
drop
the
the
max,
ISO
drop
maybe.
the ISO then.
Yeah.
So you play with these three things to get the right posture. So now what I'm looking to do, what he says, which is an impressionist, is basically having a slow shutter speed, so it allows me to capture movement. So I want a slow shutter speed. This is what I'm fixing in my triangle. And then I play with the other two things to get a right exposure.
And the last thing that you would do if you're trying this is to plan your movement.
Yes.
So I would, what do you plan for this? I would say try to keep it steady on the vertical axis and give it a shake on the horizontal axis.
Horizontal, let me see. Vertical,
So
like this.
Yeah.
All right, let's try this. Let me focus first here.
And now you see we have a nice motion blur. You can keep trying to see if you get the desired effect. You can get very creative with this stuff. Of course, this is something not necessarily very common, but it's really fun. I personally love to do these things. And yeah, you can do a lot of things. You've seen people do zooms. They zoom in as they do
Yeah, I don't
this.
have a zoom in now, but that's
Yeah.
especially if you are outside, for example, and there's some nice city lights, you can do super cool light trails as well with the zooming in, zooming out. It's very nice.
So yeah, you can do all as soon as you learn your triangle and the relation between these things, you can unlock a lot of things, a lot of capabilities with your camera. And like that's one of the things that why it's more worth it to get a camera than using a smartphone, because you won't be able to control all these things.
Or at
in the
least
same
not
way.
the same proportion.
Here, Eva, because she doesn't have a zoom, she actually tried to punch in with the camera, which not gonna give you the same effect. All right. Anything else you wanna? Do you think we missed anything, Jenny?
Janet?
I don't know if she's frozen. Janet, can you hear me? Janet, we lost Janet.
No!
Yeah.
Sorry, let me check the thingy.
All right. I'm gonna switch back to the view.
Zoom crash, I think.
All right.
Zoom crash. Zoom crashed.
Zoom crashed.
Sorry, people, this is the thing of the live.
Yeah. And now you have a nice void where Janet was. Any interesting questions in the chat?
I'm checking now. Sorry, I was busy taking pictures.
Let's see. I think they are pinned.
Also, is it better? Oh, okay. Let me just go from the above. People write a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. I have heard that 4/3 is always sharper than APS-C and full frame. Is that true?
I have no information about that. I think Janet might have something to say about this. Hold on. She's back. She will appear very shortly.
Cool. Let me see if there's any other... Someone said, damn, I never knew photography is so complicated.
Yeah,
It can be very simple, but you can also get very into it and get all these different details.
that's how it feels in the beginning.
Yeah.
But it as soon as you practice, you focus on one line of the exposure triangle, which we
Mhm.
showed earlier. I'm gonna bring it back, put it on the screen. So if you focus on only one of these aspects and keep trying it and testing with it until it becomes second nature,
Mhm.
it in a couple of weeks you will figure it out. I have a friend of mine that he recently picked up a camera. He recently got 2 babies. They're now grown enough that he doesn't need to keep worrying about them getting sick all the time. And now they're just running around and playing. So he was like,
Mhm.
I want to take photos of the babies. He's picked up a camera,
Mhm.
actually an analog camera, because his wife had it laying around in the house. And he called me and he's like, hey man, I need to, can you teach me how to use these things?
Mhm.
So I was like, sure. And we sat down and I explained everything we talked about today. And he understood nothing. And we met again and I explained everything. And he understood one thing.
But when he actually took the camera and started doing things is when he actually got to understand
So I
stuff,
gave him some film. I was like, just shoot the whole thing and give it, I'll develop it. We developed it and we looked at the pictures.
Mhm.
And then, so if you have a digital camera, you're much luckier because you can instantly see the effect.
Mhm.
So we had to actually look at the pictures that he took like last week and
Yeah.
say, here you did this. That's why this looks like that. So take a picture, have a photo, screenshot this one if you can't find it, and try to test these
Mhm.
things. And it's so easy.
Yeah, I think the best advice is to go out and try it and just collect experience. And what we want to do is we actually want to start a new challenge today or tomorrow, which is exactly about depth of field and aperture. So everything you want to do and try, upload it to the Discord, and we can talk about it maybe next week or in the discussion channel. So would be great to see some examples.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
We got a question when you were away about, is it true that micro four thirds are usually sharper than APS-C?
And full frame?
No.
And full frame, you
Don't
said.
think so.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, the sharpness is more about the lens, what you're using.
Yeah.
What's easier with MFT is just you get closer because of the crop. You have a smaller sensor, so everything appears bigger
Mhm.
on the sensor and on the final image. So if you're gonna do wildlife and birds, it's easier to get closer.
Mhm.
I think it's a good idea to cover in an episode, talk about aspect ratios.
Sensors and aspect ratios.
Yeah, and how the
Yeah.
image circle and aspect ratio. This is something that explains the stuff that Janet just said.
Yeah, I think we should cover it in depth.
Yeah.
It would be nice.
What I would say about the sharpness thingy question is that it has to do with the sensor themselves, because the size of the sensor, usually the bigger the sharper it's going to be, and that's just it is. I love micro four thirds. Both the three of us right now actually are using Olympus cameras. Like all of the feeds that you see, they're all Olympus, and and these cameras are amazing. When you're printing, until you hit a certain threshold, they're gonna look the same as relatively the same in terms of sharpness as a full frame camera, especially if the printer or the printing expert or technician know what they're doing in terms of sharpening
which
the
is,
image for printing, which is
in my opinion, it's even more important.
Yeah. So like this something has to be like understood. For a screen, it's completely different than for a print. And nobody really like comes in and zooms on images, like most of us experience photography on
Pixel peepers.
like on Instagram, on people's website. Nobody's really zooming in and going. You're the only one. The photographer is the only one that is zooming in.
I do sometimes, and I'm like, do you see this gradient here?
No,
because
but
of the compression
this is
and
a different
stuff,
thing. No, this is not the same.
I
as
know,
sharpness.
but this is what you end up seeing on social media.
Yeah, but this is like bad export settings.
Yeah.
We're talking about nobody has access to the raw files except you. So you're the only one who's going to zoom in and see it. If you don't provide a high-res photo somewhere, nobody's going to see it, right? Um, well, yeah, I don't think that's true. I think full frame is gonna be sharper,
Mm-hmm.
given that, as Janet mentioned, the lenses are equally sharp.
And good. Yeah, the
Yeah.
lens is the most
Yeah.
important thing for sharpness, for sure. We do have another question here. Is it better to use high ISO or shot a lower exposure, like a -1 compensation, and raise the shadows after in an editor when you're shooting raw? I would say it really depends on the capabilities of your camera. My camera can do really well on high ISO, so I don't shy away from using high ISO if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
I think in general, digital cameras do better in recovering shadows,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
in case you need to and your camera doesn't do so well on high ISOs, then yeah, do a minus exposure and then bring up your shadows in post. You might be able to save and have a nice shot.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on the camera you're having, and I think it needs to you can do some tests and see what is better for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really good to know the limits of your camera. So basically, what you want to do is point your camera at a simple scene, anything that is being hit by the light, and play with the meter. You have the dot that tells you it's 0, +1, +3, and the same -1, -2, -3. And then take the same photo multiple times and place one bright object at, -3, -2, +3, +2, +1, and 0. And then place an object in the shadow at 0, -1, -2, -3. Okay? And then take all of these photos into your editing software and see which one gives you the best result in terms of keeping both the highlights and the shadows. So in the ones that you pushed the highlights up, see when you bring them down if they recover nicely. And then with the shadows, bring them up,
Is the detail
see if they
not?
recover
Yeah.
nicely, and see which one is better. See if the one that recovered the shadows looked better, and how much did you have to recover? And then that will be your metering. So instead of every time pointing your camera and hitting it at a 0, maybe for your editing style, for your taste, it will be better to hit it at a -1 or a +1. So yeah, that's for me. And one digital camera that I have, I always put it at -1, for example. I always underexpose by one stop, because I feel like the editing will save anything that needs to be saved, and nothing will be clipped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
Yeah.
point.
I mean, a lot of people are talking about always keeping a low ISO, which is kind of true when you can expose correctly still with your shutter speed and your aperture. But in my opinion, it's definitely better to have a high ISO picture instead of a blurry picture at the end.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So ISO is still you can denoise it. It's not great, you will lose detail,
Yeah.
but it's still better than a unsharp or a blurred picture. Especially, I remember back, I went to see a rodeo 3 years back, and I was so afraid going over ISO. I think it was 1600.
Mm-hmm.
And basically all the pictures after dawn, they're just blurry.
Mhm.
I can't do anything with them. It's just trash. So it's better to sometimes just use a higher ISO.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if the difference is if the question is getting the picture or not,
Yeah.
go up with the ISO. I actually forgot the question. I just started rambling about exposure, but yeah, absolutely. And there was this app that I saw earlier. I think somebody was mentioning in the Discord, denoise,
AI.
denoise AI. It's crazy. I felt really fascinated and upset at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, but
The Topaz software?
yeah, the Topaz.
Yes.
But also, I think it was you, Janet, that you were mentioning that this AI or someone on a YouTube video that they might work really well in very specific set of pictures with very specific characteristics, but then do horribly bad in
Yeah.
others.
She was saying that about the other one, the sharpening one.
The sharpening one,
Because
Yeah.
there's one that makes that's crazy. That one is completely crazy.
which
insane.
makes things that they weren't even there.
Yeah, like you missed focus, and no, you didn't actually. Here it is focused. Yeah, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. However, I think the denoise is quite more consistent.
Reliable,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean,
I prefer using denoise.
yeah, I guess nowadays, it's the future. We live in the future, like you don't have to worry so much about noise anymore. I'm very surprised by the capabilities of some cameras, especially when you come from the film world where if you are already at ISO 100, everything is very noisy. So, yeah, so also some noise is kind of nice sometimes, I have to say.
I agree. Some cameras do have nice noise. Some are just horrible. Anything interesting going on in the chat? Do we have more questions?
That Cedric was saying there is also ISO invariance, which is that if you underexpose in RAW and you boost the EV in post, you actually gonna get the same result as if you would expose higher ISO in camera. Apparently.
So you will get the same noise?
That's what I understand.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, yeah. I guess. But how would you? I mean, then you can just shoot with the high ISO.
Yeah. So then you can see what you're doing. Yeah. Of course. If that's the case and that's what happens, then yeah, I would do it in camera.
Yeah, because you want to see if you got the picture or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point of shooting digital.
Kind of.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. Any other questions? Maybe?
Nothing so much so far. Do we have any other examples to show that you guys have prepared?
These are the ones that I got.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find one about the focal length. For some reason, I'm pretty sure that I found one. I sent it on the Discord long time ago.
I can give you a hand. Maybe I can find it.
But I'm looking. I mean,
You want to show the one Cedric took?
Hold on. Yeah, but I can't. Wait, I can open Discord here. All right, you guys talk so there is no dead air because you have to remember this is a podcast.
Oh yes, we should not shut up at all ever. Just to remind you also that if you are finding this podcast on YouTube and you are not already part of our amazing Photographers Lounge, there's going to be a link down below in the video notes where you can click and then join the Discord, and then you don't have to watch this episode in YouTube after. You can join us when they're happening at the server and then also get part of the conversation, which is always very nice. We have people being part of it. I was trying to also find what he was looking for, which is basically how does the focal length affect the depth of field. But I guess that you that have shot with very long lenses, you have actually seen this live, right, Janet? How the depth of field changes the longer you go.
Yes, Jimmy said earlier that the aperture is actually a fraction of the focal length.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine using f2, which is, I guess, the easiest to calculate, and you're using a 50 millimeter lens.
Mm-hmm.
It's 50 divided by 2, so it's 25. When you're using a 200 millimeter lens, it's 200 divided by 2, which is 100.
Yes.
So it's double as big, the diameter of the aperture. So you get a narrower depth of field, which it's hard to get the birds. But yeah, it also shows why there's no 300 millimeter lens 1.4.
Yes, exactly, because that would have to be
Very
a
big.
super broad lens, like basically a telescope rather than a lens, I think, of
Yeah.
how big it would be.
I don't know if you want to carry this lens. It's just physics.
We also did get a question before, I just forgot about it. Why, and someone was saying, why are prime lenses faster or something like that, which I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding there, because prime lens and how fast or not fast, they are not really related to each other.
Yeah, it's well, there are zoom lenses that are fast and they're called constant aperture constant aperture zooms, which most people, when they experience or they find a zoom lens like this one, it usually says, for example, this one is 14 to 150 millimeter. And then after that, it says 4-5.6, meaning that when it's completely zoom out, it's at f4. That's the fastest aperture it can go. And when it's completely zoomed in, it goes to 5.6. You can't go back down to 4. And the reason is, as we explained multiple times on this episode, is that aperture is a fraction, meaning that the 150 millimeter has to be divided on the same number to create the size of the opening, or the size of the opening is relevant to those two numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to keep it constant, there usually are moving stuff inside and like very advanced engineering that I'm not going to get into right now. And that's why it keeps it. So something, it's like, it's like the lens itself is changing. There's two elements that are moving to keep up that thing. It's like the speed booster kind of thingy, where you have a lens that kind of... Anyways, not going to get into this. The other thing, to explain it simpler, back in the day, there used to be lenses that are continuous aperture that didn't use this advanced engineering. They actually used to have blades that close down when it's zoomed out.
Mm-hmm.
So when you zoom out all the way...
So you potentially could have a much bigger when it's zoomed out,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't do it,
So
so you would have a constant.
Yeah, imagine this lens. When I zoom it in all the way to 150 millimeter, it goes to f5.6, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then as I zoom it out, instead of gaining more aperture, the aperture blades are going to close down to keep it all the way at 5.6.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it's more convenient to not zoom in and change your exposure accidentally. Because with this one, if I set it to f4 and my metering is perfect and I go ahead to zoom in,
I know, that happens all the time.
yeah. So it's much simpler to make a lens that doesn't zoom and have a big aperture. Because if you're going to zoom, the lens has to be, the lens can't grow as you zoom in. Like the opening can't just become wider. The lens won't do that. So it needs a lot of advanced optics and stuff like that in order to fix that issue.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So it's not that prime lenses are faster because they are prime lenses. Or in a sense, I guess maybe it is. It's just that it's easier to make a faster prime lens because you don't have to zoom in and out, and then basically the structure of the lens and the parts inside are going to be fixed, and then you can make it more open, and that's why it's going to be faster. As
Janet mentioned earlier, imagine walking around with a 300 millimeter f1.8. It's going to be huge, so it's not practical to have a lens that can zoom that much. And which one is the one that I have at home? 400 f4. And you wouldn't think f4 is a fast aperture. I mean, it's relatively on the faster end.
But yeah, 400 f4, yeah.
It's 400. Like 2 kilos or something is huge. It's bigger than my head. You can't hold the camera. You have to hold the lens, because otherwise the lens is so much heavier than the camera. So, you could potentially do a zoom like that at f4, but then it will be even bigger and heavier and more expensive.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think probably. I hope.
I did think of something. I think, that's what I want to talk about, is the difference between those two. This is the image you asked me for, Janet, is the one that Cedric took.
Yes.
So here we have f1.4. And we can see that the depth of field is very thin, basically just covering the
fence.
Door, the fence.
Mm-hmm. Whatever it is.
At f2.8, if we compare also the flowers, here we have a lot of bokeh, and these circles are the highlights on the reflections. So, maybe they were wet and they're reflecting more light. So they act like light bulbs in the scene. And here we see the circles are smaller, meaning they're becoming in focus as we go to f2.8. And then f5.6, these flowers, or not flowers, like vegetables. They're not vegetables, I'm just kidding. Flowers, they are flowers indeed. Are in slightly more in focus. They're still soft in comparison to the sharp fence, but the wall and the salad in the back is still out of focus. And here we have f11, definitely more in focus, but it can still, this part of the image can still become sharper if he continued up to f16 and f22.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think it ends at f22.
I was actually thinking about this specific topic. I was gonna say that the people should get the other day we saw a lens that had like f120 something.
Yeah.
And and also that what was it? Oh yeah, that there was a very famous group of photographers back in the beginning of the in the 40s or so, called Group F64, and they chose that name because they were very into a new kind of photography that changed from a previous type of photography that it was more, about isolating and about making photography, like it was pictorialism, so try to like make photography this art movement. And then they came and say like, no, photography also should be able to just photograph with the capabilities of photography in it of itself. We can photograph the things that we have around, and that's also valuable. So kind of like getting the bigger picture of photography, and because it's a bigger picture, more things are in focus, they decided to use F64 as the name of the group, so that you can see how things kind of connect together.
It was a bit wacky though, like they had a manifesto and everything.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a big fan of a bunch of photographers in that group. Like famous ones are like Ansel Adams, Imogen Cunningham. They took really good photos, but the manifesto is creepy. Cedric is saying that the max aperture on the photos on the camera he took these photos that we're looking at with is f16.
So how? Oh, I was saying like why there was a f22 but there wasn't an f22.
Yeah, there was not even f22.
Yeah, so you can see you can see
also
how
you should be cautious about using higher f-stops or like smaller apertures, just because of the light bends around the hole basically, which results in little not as sharp pictures anymore. So most lenses are more sharp between mostly 5.6 and 11, somewhere there.
Yeah, there's a sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the lens. Some lenses are like that, some are not.
Yeah.
It depends, but it's a very valid point. It's one of the things actually that I definitely recommend to new photographers who are curious why they're not getting sharper images. And it's you have to know the sweet spot of your or maybe more than one sweet spot, because it depends on what you're focusing on as well.
Yes, a lot of people, like I have come across this, that bokeh is very popular, so people get into photography and they're like, oh, I want the faster lens I can get, give me the sweet 50 millimeter 1.2 Canon lens that costs one kidney and half of your liver, and then they shoot at 1.2 and they are like, my photos are not sharp, what's going on? And it's like, yeah, you have a razor blade depth of field, plus your lens is not sharp at 1.2, so what are you gonna do with that? So sometimes think also smart about what is it, the capability of having a faster lens. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Can you actually take the photos you want with a different kind of lens?
And also, I mean, the same lens can do different things, like for example, if you're walking around with the 51.8, it's definitely going to be sharper if you're photographing a distant object at a much narrower aperture than if you do it at f1.8. Even if it takes crazy sharp images, portraits at f1.8, it's not going to be the same if you're photographing a building or a mountain. You have to stop down.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's the refraction issue. It is definitely an issue, which is like the problem when you close down a lens to f22 and something like that. A lot of lenses are not even designed to be shot in that aperture. And don't let that stir you away from using these apertures. Research the lens that you're going to work with, because they're not all the same. And if you have one lens to work with, know how to use which aperture to which depth. So don't shoot distant objects with f1.8, even if it was dark. Put a tripod, stop down your lens, and take a longer exposure. I'm guessing like a mountain is not going to be moving, right?
I mean,
Not gonna have
I hope
much of
so.
that.
it moves, but very slowly. It does move, but very, very, very slowly.
It does?
Yeah.
Is it because the Earth is spinning?
No, because the tectonic plates are moving.
Yeah, but that's very slow. That's even slower than the Earth spin. The Earth spinning is actually fast. I don't know.
I hope you don't see it. I hope you spin with the Earth.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see, it's probably lava.
I mean, don't shoot stars, then you see the Earth spinning.
That is true.
That's true. That'd be nice.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have done a lot of those things.
Those are cool. Actually, another day we could talk about astrophotography
Definitely.
and how to take star trails and how to try to get the Milky Way and all those things that are very hard to do.
Yes.
So what's happening in the chat? Do we have any more questions to cover here, or
We have some
should we end it?
questions that I am that's beyond my capability of knowing because it's about more mathematical things and it's how is fringing created. Tin tin tin.
I think, yeah, that's
It's a bit beyond my. I know if I look into how it is, I will be able to explain it. I don't have it on
what are we
top of my
talking
head.
about? Fringing.
Fringing, like the light fringing, and then creating these chromatic aberrations and all the stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it all goes back to different wavelengths, and they are the speed of light is different in class for each wavelength, and that's why they bend differently, and then you get those edges, colored
With the
edges.
colors, yeah.
Yeah. You see,
Yeah. So that's.
we have a.
I mean, we have
physicist
physicists. That's
on the
true.
show,
Like
so
I'm always like.
don't be.
I'm limping in that.
Don't be hesitant to bring up those questions.
Yeah. So that's actually and why then. What do lenses do to prevent that? Is it like some sort of coating? Is it some sort of like how the glass is melt or made, or how can they prevent that to happen?
Okay, this goes a little bit further. What I know, I guess there are a lot of lenses in one lens. Different, like multiple groups of different lenses,
Yep.
and they can correct it basically.
Okay. Yeah, someone is throwing out words like achromat, super achromat, and other stuff.
What? Yeah. I mean, we're gonna keep it basic
For now,
for
at
now.
least.
I think to be really like, I think this topic, even if you already know something about, unless you researched it
Yeah.
and you've been studying it for a while, I don't think it's fair for us to come here and talk about this and say that we're trying to help beginners.
Then we know, yeah.
Yeah. So, in order for me to talk about this, I need to like study it for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I don't think it necessarily affects the experience of making a photograph.
No, because you can actually not do much about it. I mean, you can know if you get more fringing or less fringing at higher f numbers, like if you have more, you can then play with that. I do think that also the softwares are able to deal with chromatic aberration and with those kind of artifacts well. And of course, yeah, cheaper lenses tend to have more chromatic aberration than more expensive lenses.
You can take photos with this, by the way.
Here comes Jimmy with his experiments.
This is why I bought this one. I'm gonna take photos with it. Wait
Wait for it. You'll
wait,
see.
where it's coming. I'm gonna take photos with this one. You're gonna be amazed how sharp they are. I don't know about this one. I might buy another one. This one is weird.
It's just dirty.
Is it?
Who
I
needs
don't know.
different group of lenses when you can have one magnifying glass?
Absolutely. I'm not kidding. You can take amazing pictures with this. You think I'm kidding, but I'm not. I'm serious. I'm that serious.
You can take pictures with a pinhole lens, so
Yeah, you can take without a lens. Absolutely. You're right, Janet.
Yeah.
You don't need a lens to take a
you
picture.
just need a hole.
Yeah.
That's true. Alrighty. There are no more questions that I see around here. So maybe we can start wrapping up or like summarizing what it is that we talked today, what we think is important for people to have in mind and to start implementing in their photography and especially in their work for the next challenge, right, Janet?
Yes. So we will announce the next challenge also tomorrow, I guess, because it's already pretty late. Which will cover everything again. We will summarize it there as well. We basically spoke about all the different settings, right? So when you want to shoot a picture, you should think about what is important in that picture. Do you want to freeze motion, or do you want to blur the background, or what's your goal in that photo and then choose one setting and choose whatever speed, shutter speed or whatever f-stop you want, and then try to get the other two correct so that you get a good exposed picture. And it's just a lot of trial and error, I guess, experience, and then you will, like, everyone will get better with time.
Absolutely. Practice is key.
Definitely.
It's just like anything else.
Yes.
If you want to be good at it, you gotta put in the hours.
I guess like a famous photographer Cartier-Bresson said, your worst photographs are your first 10,000 photographs. So only take 10,001. You'll be there.
I think every good photographer, even the really good photographers, they show maybe 1% of their pictures. Maybe not even 1, maybe 0.1% of their pictures.
Definitely.
99% are really not good, not usable at all, and the other 0.9% are okay, but not good.
I agree with you, Janet, there. Especially when it's like these photographers that have been working for like 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the amount of pictures you see in these portfolios and these exhibitions is very, very small. When I work with clients, I have a normal steady rate of a 10% delivery. So I know that if I want to deliver 100 photos, I will probably be taking around 1,000 something photos. And this is because I also take photos in a very fast environment, and it's things moving here and there and changing locations and so on and so forth. But definitely, yeah, it's around that range. And it is good, it is bad, it is what it is. And especially with digital, you can afford it in a sense. If I would do the same thing in film, I will probably kill myself.
Or charge much more to take photos.
Definitely. But I will also feel so bad of all that film not used for something good.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's just when you just start, don't think your pictures are bad just because you took 10 blurry pictures at the beginning. It takes a lot more pictures.
We got a question that was supposed to be in the intro of the episode, but we'll do it on the back end. Nurul asked, how long have you all been taking photographs? Let's start with you, Janet.
So I think I've been taking photos for 11 years now. Yeah, probably 11 years. I got my first mirrorless camera 2014, I think, yeah. And then I started taking more pictures 3 or 4 years ago, like really got into it, started shooting manual and yeah, collecting lenses and cameras and everything.
And how would you say, like now I know like photography is a big part of your life. Like you work with it. You are a working photographer. Besides your main studies, even though like, but you do get jobs. And how many years in would you say that this thing kind of happened? Of course, like not everybody who picks up a camera for that length of time is gonna. I mean, I've been shooting for the same amount of time, probably longer because I'm older than you. But what I'm trying to say that I never got into it really like the same way that you do. You already had, from the stuff you showed me, you've had more jobs than I did. So, so what I'm saying is. This is irrelevant. Like not everybody who picks up a camera, their goal is to work with it. But what I'm saying is that I know that photography is a big part of your life. And when do you see that it was just a thing that you're doing and now it's like you're more involved? What flipped the switch and how long in?
I think COVID made a big influence on this. Because I did landscapes and wildlife and all those things. I just love being outside in the nature and spending time there, but you don't make money with that. So I started taking more portraits. I think it was last year around this time with COVID. I did some portraits before, like families came, asked, hey, can you take a picture of me and stuff like this, which I did, and everyone was happy. I never thought about posing or anything like that before. Yeah, I think before, like, started last year this time. So I knew my camera already. I could do good pictures, but I started to read books about posing, about portraits, about lighting, flash. I got a studio last Christmas, so a backdrop and some flash and some lights. So yeah.
So, oh, it's been a year like that. You got deep into photography, but
Yeah,
of course,
really
as you
deep
said,
thanks
like
to COVID.
yeah, well, yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, you already knew, as you said, like you already understood, had a good understanding of the exposure triangle. You were just doing it for fun, going out, taking photos of landscapes, and I mean, it's a great hobby. Honestly, it's a lot for me. It's my favorite. It's what I've been doing
Yeah, definitely.
all the time. What about you, Eva? How long have you been doing it? And tell us about it.
Mm, I think like consciously taking photos on purpose because I enjoy the act of taking photos. I started in 2007, 2008, so
Mm-hmm.
that's about 14 years,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? Jesus, 14 years. And I started with digital. I really liked it. I learned the basics. I learned how to use the camera more creatively. I shot a lot of bad photos, but I learned a lot as well. And then I got into analog photography because I really love cameras in and of themselves, just because how they look and how each one is used differently. So I got into analog photography. I spent a few years doing a lot of analog photography, learning about film, developing film, and all those things. And then I kind of got very busy with other things in my life. I was doing a PhD. I spent a lot of time in the lab, and I kind of left photography a little bit on the side, and then I started going back to photography because people asked me to take photos of them for one thing or another. And that's when I started to work with people's photography. Before, as Janet, it was just like things around me, landscapes, things like that. And then after I worked with these people, for a while, I started to realize that people were very happy. I was able to make people happy with my photography. And a couple of friends, they just pushed me into like, like people would really like to get your service. So that's how I started having clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about 3 years ago in 2018. And then I focused a lot into that, so I left my analog part aside and my creative photography aside. I focused into delivering to my clients a bit more, and at some point I didn't like that so much. And then last year, then I went back to analog photography and more creative photography, and it is wonderful. So now I try to share my time between these two things plus my job and other stuff.
Nice. I don't know when I started. I think. By the way, I know why you're smiling. I wonder why. What happened last year that made you switch back to analog?
Corona times were interesting. No, last year, yeah, we met, and you were a big part of like putting me back into like, hey, you maybe wanna think about taking photos just for the sake of you enjoying taking photos. And I'm very grateful that you did that because I really enjoy it, and especially going back to analog photography was the best, the best present that Corona could have brought to me actually.
Right?
Yeah,
So much
very
fun.
nice.
Yeah, I was. I was. Hold on. Yeah, is there problems in
No, no,
there?
no, no, no. Don't worry. No,
Oh,
nothing.
cool. I thought because I thought the sound dropped. All right. Um, yeah, I started a long time ago. I think I remember. I remember started taking photos when I got the first phone with a camera,
Mm-hmm.
and the camera was my favorite thing of that phone. It was, and I would just go around and take, like close-ups of things, heavy editing. It was a Nokia N70, so it was new. So I don't know what year that came out. And then I started
Love
with
it.
that one. I was editing. I still have some of the photos I took with that one. And then I switched to the iPhone 4, and I took a lot of photos with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Never had access to a camera at that age because, they were expensive and stuff like that, and film wasn't a thing where I come from. So towards 2008, 2009, I met a friend who was a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
I was in university at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a couple of years older than me, already graduated and working, and so he would let me, play around with the camera that he has. He had an EOS Rebel something. He was working with it, so I went back home. I know I've seen a camera somewhere. My dad had the D 3000.
10, 3,100.
No.
No.
The 3000.
Ah, okay.
The OG.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. So he had that one. He was using it to like for the family business to take photos of the items that we sell. And I was like, okay, this is mine now. I just took it because it was dusty. Like, obviously, he wasn't using it. He was using his phone instead to take product photos. So I picked it up. It came with a 1855 kit lens. And I started taking photos, and then as soon as I got some money, I bought the macro lens that I still have, Tamron 90 2.8, beautiful lens. And everybody was like, what do you need this lens for? I was like, street photography. They were like, what? I was like, yeah. And I did some of my favorite work with that lens, with that combination. And yeah, so I would say like I was in love with taking photos from as soon as I owned the camera, which was long time ago. I was still in school. I'm 32 years old, so I don't. Obviously, people are saying I look 10 years younger since I shaved, but yeah, I am 32, and yeah. So I haven't worked with photography. Like I haven't officially worked with photography. Like I never had a website or a business. Let's say I've worked with musicians. I've done some videography here and there, and I've worked with very few clients, mostly friends who need a photographer and they don't have so much money to spend. So I usually just do it for free, but it's the same work as a paid job. I just don't feel like doing it because for me personally, it kills the magic of the, and I've wrestled with this. We talked about this. I've wrestled with this. Like I should be making money off photography because some people say I'm good at it. So, I can't say let's not get into that. But, it stops being fun. And for me, photography is one of the most fun things in life. Like it's the thing I love the most to do.
I understand you. I think it's for some people, working with people for photography is just not something they would enjoy. So either you find they would enjoy when it comes to photography wise. So either you find another angle why you enjoy it, doing it, and then you have a good time while you're photographing people, not because you're taking photos of them, but because of the whole experience.
Yeah, but that's your experience. You're friendly. I'm not.
yeah, but that's what I mean. That's what I mean. That some people, even if they're good at photography, just taking photos of people, even if they would be good photos, it's not going to be a good experience.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It really depends on the person. Like, I don't know, Janet, how you are with, like, why you were driven towards taking photos of people. But for me, is the whole experience. Like, I like making people feel comfortable with themselves and then being happy with seeing themselves in a photo, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also like gaining a lot of self-confidence shooting other people and telling them what to do. It's something you need to get used to, but it's a lot of fun and it's so different from wildlife and nature and landscape. And it's so different. And I don't want to miss any of them. Like I like to do all. When people ask me what's your favorite type of photography, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I understand the dilemma. I mean, there doesn't have to be favorite, really. You just do whatever you want. It's like asking an athlete of some sport, like what's a good example? A football player. What's your favorite way to kick the ball? I mean, what? Is that even a question? It's like I kick it however I like. That's the point of the game. It's like there's no rules on how I can kick the ball.
Yeah.
And there's no rules on how you can use the camera. It's your camera. Do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
In sports, you still have rules, though.
Yeah, you're not supposed to hit other players, so don't hit other people with your camera. It's not a weapon.
That's good, yeah.
It's a picture-taking device. All right. Are you guys comfortable if we end it here?
Wrap
Do you have
up?
anything? And I don't think there's any more questions in the chat because we want to hop in the stages on Discord where everybody can talk. when they raise their hand and talk to us and share with us and tell us whatever they want to tell us.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a good point to move into there, so then everyone can get a little bit more chatty and kind of. There's 17 people watching, so if all of us just move into there, it's gonna be a very nice conversation.
Yep.
Just the last point thing. Jimmy and I, we also have another photography podcast that's tomorrow. I think a little bit of self-promotion here wouldn't be bad. We talk mostly about photography and not so many like technical questions, although sometimes they come up and we talk about them, but we love to review other people's work. We like to talk about sometimes even the philosophy of photography and analog photography
it's just 1 hour rant of myself, so
no.
come check it out if you want. Let's end this thing.
Yeah, tomorrow we will have it at 6 p.m. and we normally leave it here in the server as well, so
all right.
Be nice.
Thank you all for joining us. This was the first episode, a bit all over the place, but I think it was nice. I hope you think so too. Thank you, Janet and Eva, for joining me during this conversation. And all right, everybody.
See you next week. Post-show Q&A. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.